Hello fellow engineers and gamers, welcome back to the channel where you get all your updated information of New World. If you find anything of value in this video, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. I also have a Discord that I'm starting and also a company that I'm starting, so please check out that link in the description if you are interested. Welcome to the New World tier list, where we're going to go over what I think the best PvP weapons are in New World. By PvP weapons, I do mean dueling 1v1 in some of those competition tournaments that are community driven. Maybe some outpost rushes or more war instances where AoE becomes a bigger factor with 20v20s or 50v50s. And then also skirmishes out in the world when you're doing those PvP faction quests and you want to be able to kill the other team that's contesting or trying to contest your region. Those become important aspects as well. So to start this out, we're going to go with the bow here. I think the bow, without a doubt, is a C weapon. It scales off dexterity and focuses on like long range attacks and kiting around. Kiting around in New World is an interesting concept because there's so many gap closers in New World. You have things like the Fire Staff's Burnout spell or the New World Reap spell going up and trying to close that gap between bows. Once bows get near something or around something, they're going to fall off drastically. Not to mention the skill cap that goes along with bow. You have to be able to land all your shots like you're a CSGO god, and most of us can't run that. I mean, most of us are still in Nova or rocking the silver Valorant emblem and can't really land those shots like in New World. They do have some interesting skills such as like rapid shot and splinter shot. If I saw an upgrade to like splinter shot where the damage output was higher and all 3 or 5 of those arrows hit the individual when they got close, I can see the bow going up to a or even S tier weapon. But since that doesn't exist and since it's so easy to dodge splinter shot, the bow just falls off. It's really not that good in war. It's very insignificant in duels, and it's just not a good weapon overall compared to some of the other options that you have here. Next up, we have Fire Staff, Fire Magic. I mean, this is an intelligence weapon. You are a pyromancer, fire god, and honestly, S tier all the way. It is such a good weapon. It is so versatile. You could do things like dive into the backline and use spells like Incinerate and really push around the backline or push around even the front line and burn them very significantly. It has the highest output damage in the game. It is a very good weapon. It's also versatile because you can do things like far away casting and light armor, where you're focusing on using Pillar of Fire and Fireball, or you can go in close and use that Incinerate spell and burn out and dive in. It does tons of damage. It does have some mana problems in the beginning, but I'm really looking at these weapons as terms of them all the way maxed out, and you can put the mastery points wherever you want. And once that happens, Fire Staff is the GOAT when it comes to damage DPS output. There has been video instances of wars where Fire Staff has done 3-4 million damage. When I did wars in all of the betas, Fire Staff had the most damage output. And since I have a bias on war, because in my opinion they're more significant and more important than solo skirmishes because of the region and because of the benefits of owning regions, Fire Staff is arguably the best weapon, maybe second best weapon here on the tier list. Great Staff is also an S tier weapon without a doubt. It is a strength weapon that scales completely off strength, and it has a high scaling off strength. It does tons of damage. It is a front lines wet dream, considering that it has the Reap skill, which pulls foes in, kind of like the Darius pull in League of Legends. It is great at being a frontliner and creeping into that backline, especially in wars. In solo instances, it has Gravity Well, where it can pull foes down and root them or make it really hard for them to move for a couple of seconds. Makes it really hard for those kiters that use bows and Fire Staff, life staffs, and muskets. And on top of that, people that need mobility like the hatchet and the rapier and the spear have a hard time getting around these gravity wells. Not to mention that it also has lifesteal, which healing in New World is so important that it's arguably one of the most important aspects of New World, because if you have health, you're alive and you can do damage. Simple as that. Hatchet, A tier weapon. It's not as great as Fire Staff. It's not as good as Great Axe, but it holds its own. I think the throwing tree is pretty useless unless you have poison. Maybe using like rendering throw, because you don't want to put too many points into that throwing tree unless you're going to use it. It scales off of strength and dexterity, and its biggest highlight is the berserk skill and its ultimate mastery ability, defying death. Being able to live for 3 seconds and being invulnerable makes it very easy to dive into the backline and disrupt and distract significantly to those healers and also those fire staff users, those fire staff users. It also does tons of damage very quickly to weapons like the great axe. I would argue that the hatchet out damages everything except the fire staff. It is such a great weapon. Where it falls off is its versatility and having no CC. It is a pure damage weapon that just wants to hit you as fast and as much as possible. And because of that, it is very easy to kite around and very easy to out CC in damage, especially like the great axe using gravity well. The hatchet also has some really cool perks like the Berserker Purge, which gets rid of all crowd control effects. And in the closed beta, I don't know if they fixed this in the open beta, but you could get out of the gravity well of the great axe. And that made this weapon so good, especially with the passive healing that comes along with using Berserk. Another magic weapon that's so good and really comparable to the Fire Staff is the Ice Gauntlet. I'm going to put the Ice Gauntlet as an A tier weapon above the hatchet. The Ice Gauntlet is a must-have weapon in wars. With its AoE spells of Ice Storm, there's no cap on AoE damage at the moment, similar to how there's a cap on AoE damage in Guild of Wars. At the moment, I mean, this is a monster in those wars, 20v20s or even 5v5 skirmishes, where you can just use Ice Storm, switch over to your Rapier or your Fire Staff, and just annihilate the enemy. On top of that, they have the Pillar, which gives you pretty much a second projectile that shoots the whole time, and Entomb, which gets you back that mana if you do run out. Ice Gauntlet is a great spell to use. What I've been running is the Ice Pylon. Using that ultimate frost ability at the end of that tree is so strong, especially in wars. Life Staff is an interesting weapon because we are want to put it in the D list because it does no damage, but it doesn't belong in the D list. It belongs in the S list, and it belongs actually in that first slot. Life Staff is the #1 weapon for all PvP situations except dueling. And even right now in dueling, it is a powerful weapon. Unless there's a nerf to the Life Staff, you can self-heal to full HP and out-heal any of the other people's damage by yourself. You can also rock it in the backline, healing up people in war and skirmishes, meaning that it is the most powerful PvP weapon out there because of its sustainability, specifically with your self-healing. You can put healing dots on people where it heals yourself over time, even on enemies. The Life Staff is a great weapon and the best weapon in New World when it comes to PvP. Next up, we have Musket. Musket is going straight to the D. I was a Hatchet Musk user in the closed beta, and although I love the Musket and have a super big hard on for it, it sucks. The only good skills that it has are traps and the powder burn and maybe the stopping power. It does, however, shoot very far, which is a cool, unique aspect of the Musket. But the skill gap on it is so huge. Again, having to be one of those CSGO players or some type of immortal on Valorant, it is so hard to use the Musket. If you can land your shots, don't get me wrong, the Musket is a powerful weapon, just like all of these weapons are powerful in their own ways. But because it is so hard to use this weapon, and because it really only does good at a distance, it's not very good in solo instances or in war instances. It does have a niche, however, similar with the bow that I should have mentioned earlier, where it does a good job of hitting people off of like turrets and cannons in wars. But compared to the Fire Staff, I mean, it just doesn't compete. The Rapier is also a dex and intelligence weapon. It is mostly paired with either the Fire Staff or the bow or the Musket, because depending if you're going dexterity or intelligence. I think that the Rapier is a unique weapon for duels specifically, It has like the flurry ability, which makes it so it does tons of damage. It also has that parry ability, the evade ability. It has a lot of good things for dueling specifically. If you took out the dueling aspect and looked at its skirmishes and its war abilities, it does fall off, however. But because it is so good in duels, I'm going to put it right at the B tier. I think it could be used very well in wars combined with the fire staff, but just don't think it competes overall with like the great axe, fire staff, ice gauntlet, and hatchet. Third up on the list, or third to the last on the list, we have the spear. The spear is an interesting weapon for its dueling capabilities as well, similar to the rapier. It does a really good job at CCing and zoning players. Also, it has some of the things that rapier has, like the flurry. It does kind of play like the rapier, except it has a little bit more CC. Rather than trying to parry or dodge your enemy's attacks, you're looking to cripple them and take advantage of crippling them. Because of this, I'm going to put it right at the B list too. I don't think it's something to consider in terms of like the best weapon in the game, although I think it does have its area of expertise, such as dueling and some small skirmishes. In war, I don't think this is a vital option, and because of this, I'm going to put it in the B list. Sword and shield, A list. Everyone needs a tank, and tanks are great, right? It also has the longest stun in the game with the sword bash. It has the leaps and some backstab abilities where it does extra damage from the backside, some critical hits and things like that. It also is very good because it gives a buff to everyone around you that's in your party, like a 10% damage buff if you go down that tree. It is definitely a tank weapon, and it can be good, but has a large skill cap. If you're comparing it to something like the hatchet is so much easier to use. And although it doesn't have a stun, you don't really need it when you're out damaging the enemy. So because of that, I'm going to put the sword and shield after the hatchet. I think that is a great weapon, and I think with the right person, it can be better than the hatchet and even the ice gauntlet and arguably even the great axe. But because of that high skill cap, I'm going to put it at the end of the A list for most players because of that. The last weapon is a very interesting weapon. It is the Warhammer. Part of me wants to put this in the B tier list. Part of me wants to put this in the S tier list. It is a great weapon, and because of that, I'm going to put it right here in the A tier list, right after the ice gauntlet. I think that the CC that comes with the Warhammer is so great, being able to distract and disrupt enemies as they're in wars, being able to chase down kiters and people that are trying to avoid being close to you with your ultimate stun. I mean, the Warhammer has its place in PvP, and it is definitely a great weapon. Where it falls off is after you use the stun, it becomes pretty much useless. You stun, you switch to your main weapon like Great Axe, and you go to town. But other than that, I mean, it really doesn't have a good place in terms of damage. It does, however, have a great place in terms of CC, pulling out that main weapon and obliterating your enemy. And because of this, I'm going to put it in the A list. So thank you guys for watching. I hope maybe this made you consider what weapon to use during New World. Maybe you didn't know about anything that I mentioned in this video. Please let me know down in the comments, like and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. All right, thanks for watching, and goodbye.